My name is Igichul. I'm Consul General of South Korea to Los Angeles. I'm very much honored, to make congratulatory remarks in this meaningful event. I'm sorry I was a bit late, so I will try to be very short. And this is just, congratulatory remarks, so don't take my words too much serious. A couple of months ago, I read the survey report about the perception of the ordinary American people on 30 minority groups in the United States. The questionnaire of the survey was quite direct questions, such as, are you willing to accept the Korean man and woman as your son-in-law or daughter-in-law? Will you be happy to hear from your children that their best friends are Korean Americans? In this survey, South Korea ranked 26 out of 30 minority groups. Yes. This survey was conducted about 6 years ago, so it may not be very accurate at this moment, but I believe it gives us a certain degree of truth. Another example is a survey on which country is the strongest ally of the United States. South Korea ranked number 27 out of 144 countries. South Korea did better in this survey than in the previous one. But I think it is still disappointing. South Korea and the United States fought together against the aggression by the North Korea during the Korean War. The United States sacrificed as many as 36,940 young American soldiers for the freedom and democracy of South Korea. So we are blood allies. Even after the Korean War, the United States supported South Korea by providing economic aid and also sometimes by awakening the importance of democracy. South Korea paid back to the United States by becoming the best example, demonstrating that the American value, which is democracy and market economy, finally prevails. In addition, South Korea has become one of the strong partners in the international relations. And also now at this moment, the South Korea is the sixth largest trading partner of the United States. With those things in mind, I believe South Korea should rank at least 5 to 6. These discrepancies, I believe, come from the fact that the American people know too little about South Korea and about the special relations between our two countries. Even here in Los Angeles, the American people, they know Korean community, but they know very little about South Korea itself. Public diplomacy should take realistic and cool-headed approach in order to be successful. So I sincerely hope this seminar will greatly contribute to evaluating the current status from on the basis of the reality and the analyzing the causes of the problem, and finally shedding a light on the future direction of Korea's public diplomacy. Thank you.
We have two distinguished speakers with us this morning. And let me first introduce my colleague from USC, David Kang, and who will be facilitating this discussion. David Kang is Professor of International Relations and Business at USC, with appointments in both the School of International Relations and our Marshall School of Business. He's also the Director of Korean Studies Institute and the Center for International Studies. David's latest book is America's Grand Strategy and East Asian Security in the 21st Century. So David, I turn to you.
Thanks. This is wonderful. I'm delighted to see the Consul General. everyone who's here. Thanks to Korea Foundation for their generous support. So I don't want to take too much time. I will introduce the ambassador. He will speak for about 20 minutes. I may make some follow-up comments, and then ideally we'll open it up for interaction, right? So we're delighted to have Ambassador Shin here. He's currently a professor at Yonsei's Graduate School of International Studies. But before then, he was Secretary General of the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat. He's a graduate from Seoul National University and a PhD from the University of North Korean Studies. Kang? Yeah. Okay. He joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1978 and has held numerous positions and is also fluent in Chinese and served as ambassador to Jordan. So he has a wonderful set of experience over the decades with both Korea and Korea's diplomacies.
Thank you very much, David, for your kind introduction. And as I was introduced, I had served in the Korean Foreign Ministry for more than 35 years and left the Foreign Ministry around 2 years ago, and now I'm teaching at Yonsei. Last year, this year, and there was a presidential election in Korea, I advised President Moon Jae-in in the camp, and after the new administration was launched, I had an opportunity to be sent to China as a special envoy, and had a chance to meet with President Xi Jinping and also Foreign Minister Wang Yi and other important dignitaries. And today's topic, which I would like to address to you, is the North Korean issue and public diplomacy. Actually, when I was advised to talk about this issue, I was really embarrassed how this North Korean issue and the public diplomacy could be interrelated. Anyway, I'll try my best. I would like to begin this presentation. I have a prepared text, actually, by telling you about some of the conversations that I had this past June in the Swedish capital of Stockholm with representatives from the North Korean Foreign Ministry's Disarmament and Peace Initiative. Peace Institution. This is so-called the Track 1.5 meeting held in Sweden this June. One senior delegate told me that he saw the new Moon administration, which came to power following the recent South Korean candlelight protests, as the ideological successor to the Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun administrations. As a result, he had hopes about the possibility of an improved inter-Korean relationship, but he also, this is the point, he also expressed his doubts and concerns about whether that would be possible, especially since, in his view, the United States would try to prevent anything like that from happening. I asked the representative, don't you think that the North Korean missile tests, which continue to happen even after the Moon Jae-in administration has come to power, is putting our new liberal government, which desires better relations with the North, in a tight spot? The representative replied that our issue is not one that can be solved, that can be resolved simply by having an amicable government in the South. In the end, we have no choice but to strengthen ourselves to be able to independently stand against the United States. As a result, North Korean nuclear and missile tests will continue as planned, regardless of any administration changes in the South. He also told me to look at what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, whom he called victims of the United States and other powerful nations. He had a very real political view towards this issue and believed that the very existence of North Korea completely depended upon the actions of the United States. He also explained to me that nuclear weapons were a strategic strategic decision that we made after over 70 years of careful deliberation, and consequently, we will never give them up. Furthermore, he claimed that North Korea was already a de facto nuclear state, that their nuclear war had reached a level of standardization, and that development of an ICBM was in its very last stage. What happened after the Track 1.5 meetings in regards to the North Korean nuclear weapons and missile development program is something that most of you in the audience are probably familiar with. Despite the hopes of the Moon Jae-in government, North Korea launched 8 medium and long-range missiles within just 5 months of the new South Korean administration coming to power. In particular, on August and September, North Korea launched what they claim was an ICBM over Japanese airspace and into the North Pacific. And on September 3rd, they carried out a nuclear weapons test that had an estimated explosive yield of 50 to 160 kiloton. This means that North Korea's technology has developed to the point that their missile and nuclear weapons are comparable to ICBMs and hydrogen bombs, respectively. In other words, just as the North Korean representative at the Track 1.5 meeting in Sweden said, the North Korean government is doing things their own way, on their own schedule, irrespective of what the new South Korean government or the general international society's opinion. Indeed, it seems that in this current situation, North Korea seems to believe that there is no significant benefit or meaning to having talks with the South Korean government. Instead, it seems that they are planning to improve their nuclear weapons and missile capabilities to the point of being able to use them in real combat, and to subsequently negotiate directly with the United States as a de facto nuclear state. Well, so how can South Korea, the United States, and the international society deal with the situation? I think we may come up with several different scenarios. This is my personal analysis. First is the possibility of a first strike against North Korea. The military option is to eliminate North Korea's nuclear weapons and ICBM before they can be perfected and installed for use in combat. The problem here is that South Korea's metropolitan areas are exposed to North Korean long-range artillery, which are concentrated along the south-north ceasefire line. However, some military experts said that the South Korean capital of Seoul, composed of apartments and office buildings, is like an enormous concrete defensive structure, and since artillery simply doesn't have the penetrative force to punch through concrete, the city and citizens would not suffer as much damage as you might expect from a North Korean artillery attack. But this is one expert's analysis, not mine. However, due to the nature of war, there are considerable risks that are quite frankly unavoidable. In 1994, the Clinton administration tried to use precision bombing to destroy North Korean nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. However, the attempt was blocked by the then South Korean President Kim Young-sam, who later wrote in his memoir that he did so because he was afraid that it would lead to another outbreak of the Korean War. President Clinton recently said that he regretted not annihilating North Korea's nuclear facilities back then. Of course, the situation now is much worse than it was back then, and it is uncertain whether current American or South Korean leaders are prepared to handle the enormous consequences that are involved. A second scenario can be impose heavy sanctions to force North Korea to negotiate. This scenario is to force North Korea to the negotiating table by imposing heavy sanctions on the country. North Korea can then be convinced possibly to freeze and ultimately get rid of their nuclear and missile arsenals in return for the international community assuring the security of the regime. However, given that North Korea has been able to withstand similar sanctions in the past, we are not quite sure how much of an impact those sanctions might actually have. Furthermore, even if the North can be convinced to come to the negotiating table, it is unreasonable to assume that they would completely give up their nuclear ambitions. China once tried to argue for a simultaneous freeze of both the United States South Korean joint military exercises and North Korean nuclear activities. However, North Korea, as of now, already boasts very significant nuclear capabilities. So simultaneous cessation policy may have already lost most of its merits. The third scenario is an uneasy coexistence with North Korea, a de facto nuclear state. In this scenario, South Korea will have to look to the nuclear umbrella of the US for protection and will have to rely on nuclear deterrence to maintain an uneasy peace with the North. In the meantime, there would like be a constant outcry in South Korea to reinstall its strategic nuclear weapons and also to build upon its own nuclear capabilities. Given the possibility of North Korean nuclear blackmail, South Korean citizens will have the threat of North Korean nuclear weapons hanging over their heads at least for the foreseeable future. Now I will turn on the public diplomacy to resolve the North Korean issue. I think even under such conditions, however, South Korea should strive to alleviate inter-Korean tensions through dialogue and bilateral exchange. Moreover, South Korea should continue to use social media platforms and leverage its soft power to engender change in the North. North Korean society has been undergoing a remarkable inner dynamic characterized by spontaneous marketization from below on one hand and foreign information flows into North Korea. These may induce changes in North Korean state-society relationship, eventually posing a great challenge to the Pyongyang regime. Surveys on North Korean refugees and travelers conducted show a steep increase in North Korean people's access to digital media and equipment such as DVD, USB drives, and mobile phones. Major suppliers of outside information are human rights organizations and South Korean NGOs, mostly run by North Korean defectors. Merchants and tradesmen who are involved in trading and smuggling digital media and equipment for commercial purposes are also important suppliers. Then what actually does outside information do? It brings changes in North Korean people's beliefs and attitude toward outside world. And also it helps emergence of deviant subculture. We call it Jangmadang generation. Jangmadang means in North Korea the small market. And also defection as an exit option. Motivations of defection changes from livelihood-related needs to pursuit of better life. And this kind of outside information flow also, of course, dilute the North Korean authorities. Since the arduous March period in the 1990s, the defunct public distribution system and the spontaneous marketization from below drastically reduced North Korean people's economic reliance on the state in such a way to weaken the regime's cooptation of people through material remuneration. Then what is the policy implications? The past approach toward the North under the progressive administrations of Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun government pursued change from above through sunshine and engagement policies. Meanwhile, public diplomacy approach should be aimed at facilitating gradual change from below or within North Korean society that has been already underway for the past 2 decades in the form of spontaneous marketization and information circulation. Public diplomacy aiming at North Korean society and people is compatible with either engagement or hardline policies towards Pyongyang regime.
I'm just going to make a couple comments prompted both by the ambassador and then some thoughts on the topic at hand, public diplomacy in North Korea. And then we'll open it up. So I don't tend to take anywhere near the longest time. The first observation, which should be obvious, is that I think public diplomacy, the Center for Public Diplomacy, Annenberg, this is your crisis. It is so obviously about the atmospherics and the presentation of North Korea and the United States. And so in many ways, this is where we really do look to Annenberg for insights and for perspective on what's going on. Because the difference, this is without question the most attention I've ever seen to North Korea. Now, that doesn't mean I think it's actually a worse crisis. I'm actually not convinced it is. But there is overwhelmingly more attention. I never ever expected in my life to have this much attention on what I study. Sort of nice, right? But it is insane how American media has gone berserk about North Korea. And I'm not convinced it's because of what North Korea is doing, right? There's so much going on here. So even during the other crises, yes, sometimes policymakers pay attention. Once a year, CNN would call me up. And now it is literally every single day. So this is your time to shine, because I think we are missing a lot of what's going on. Because I don't do communications and public diplomacy. But over essentially the last 10 months, I've become convinced more and more that we are missing this part. I was talking to a reporter yesterday, and they were saying, well, Trump said it's the calm before the storm, right? And so point number 2 is this. I think in some ways we are not doing ourselves a favor. First of all, I think that the mainstream American media, and I use that not pejoratively, right? Just, American media, is so concerned about Trump that we react to him more than react to what's going on the ground. And I haven't formulated, I may start saying this or writing it, but I was talking to this guy literally yesterday, of a couple I talked to on the phone, and they're like, but he said he's going to annihilate blah, blah, this calm before the storm. And I said, you guys are lurching back and forth depending on whatever impetuous tweet he says. And you're trying to parse the meaning of what he says when I'm not at all convinced that he has anything other than he's trolling you and he'll say whatever he wants and you guys jump and you scream over here and you run over there, right? But he's president. I say, well, it's your job as media and whatever to interpret what he says and not let him set an agenda where fundamentally the reason that I think it's not as bad a crisis as we act like it is that we are still fundamentally in the realm of rhetoric. Nothing different has happened. We have not shot at them, they have not shot it up. It is tests and name calling. And that's where we need to think, we need to have better tools in this, because we take Trump almost literally, like we have no tools to interpret it. And then we run over, North Korea we get, right? I mean, I know they talk that way, but our own president is speaking flamboyantly. Yet fundamentally, when I parse through what he's doing, it remains fundamentally to me a deterrent message that he's saying. He has still not said, I will preemptively strike North Korea no matter what. Essentially, most of his comments, either they're totally, what does it mean, the calm before? It doesn't mean anything. Why are we wasting our time? But when he does say something about we will wipe them off the face of the earth, he says, if they attack us first, we will wipe them off. If North Korea doesn't blah, 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 right? So the reporter said to me, well, he said this, that we can't go on. We can't live with a nuclear North Korea. That means World War III is going to start tomorrow. I said, every single American president has said the same thing. That's what strategic patience was. Now, it was said differently. That's why we need people to study public diplomacy. Yes, it was said a little more like we expect presidents to speak, but it's fundamentally the same thing. We're not going to live with a nuclear North Korea. I said to people in the Bush administration and the Obama administration, but we are, right? We can say we refuse to live with nuclear North Korea, but we are. We already have been. So yes, maybe what he's saying is consequential, but I really wish we had a little bit more ability to take a step back and not let the rhetoric of the situation have us zooming back and forth. Maybe it is a worse crisis than in 1997, or I just put up on Twitter, if you want to see, stuff from 1976 saying this is an incredible tinderbox, the axe murders, war is at hand. You could literally just change the date 40 years later and it would be today. Is it different? Maybe, but we really thought war was likely then, and in 83 and in 94. So it might be, but we are not doing ourselves a favor. We are not doing our job as people who know about North Korea to let other people determine the agenda. So that's number two, and I think it's not about Korea, it's about America and the media and Trump and his unbelievable ability to formulate things. I mean, he's brilliant. I mean, he's brilliant at what he's doing. And we're letting him set the terms. And he might have to, and he might not have to, right? So I just put that there as an observation, right? Number three is, as I think is very obvious, and as both the Consul General and as the Ambassador said, what I find striking about this is how South Korea has been left without a voice. More again, and again, the amount of noise in the United States means it's very hard to get a word in edgewise, I get it. But it is really remarkable how President Moon, Korea went through its own problems with a president who was under impeachment and basically interim, in limbo for a year, essentially, right? You finally get a president, and all hell breaks loose, and I can't even, yes, President Moon, right? He comes to Washington, and New York, and I barely know what he said. Now, it might not matter if President Moon and South Korea as a government and as a people of 50 million people basically like the strategy and the way things are going. Then it's fine. If they're like, sure, I'm just, whatever whatever America. I don't think that's the case. I think South Korea has a different perspective on this. Doesn't mean it probably has a perspective that might have a little more nuance to it, might have a little more perspective on what the implications of a war would be for America and for America's closest allies in ways that is not getting out. And so this has become U.S. North Korea in a way that I don't think serves South Korea's interests. And that's from the president on down of how do you, in a environment like we are today, a public diplomacy environment that we're in today, get a alternative perspective, and it's incredibly important to hear, an incredibly important perspective. So I don't have an answer to that per se, but I do think that this is the forum that we should talk about it in.
Hi, my name is Kristen, or Unjong in Korean name. I've graduated from public diplomacy program, and I'm working at Norman Year Center right now as a project specialist. And since I'm focused more on evaluating the public diplomacy projects of the United States that are funded by the State Department, I was really into evaluating, the public diplomacy, initiatives that are from South Korea, and then this all, these all controversial situations happened, which I feel like it's really hard for South Korea to put forward any sort of public diplomacy project, and let alone think about evaluation. So right now, what I'm more concerned and curious about is what is South Korean government strategy, or the image that they want to put forward as branding its nation when it comes to North Korea, when it comes to China, when it comes to U.S. What I believe is that it doesn't have to be one unified image that they want to promote. Depending on the state, and the interests that are involved in between the bilateral relations, it could differ. So if there are any ideas or anything that anyone in the panels have ever thought of in sort of how to moderate and also modify or come up with new images depending on the states that we're dealing with, given
Okay,
the
thank you.
political situation. it'd
Yes,
be
let's
great.
turn over the ambassador.
Actually, I'm not an expert on public diplomacy, but anyway, you see how South Korean government's strategy should be in way of branding its national image toward the United States or North Korea or China. I think that, of course, democracy, see, which Korea accomplished in just a couple of decades, see, democracy and economic development. And that is I think the most strong point which we can brand ourselves to China and North Korea, and continuously asking North Korea to see democratize their system, and also we would like to input the market system to North Korea. And as I said in my presentation already, there is a spontaneous marketization from below in North Korea after the collapse of distribution system in North Korea. And actually this marketization has a great has an importance, has a meaning of potential to change the North Korean regime. So I think this, as I emphasized, the inflow of information to North Korea and also marketization of North Korea which is the most important two elements which South Korea can do with regard to the public diplomacy toward North Korea.
I'm Lucy. I'm the speechwriter at the Korean consulate, and I also come from a background in journalism. So I was, I guess, interested in, I don't know, speaking in terms of public diplomacy, especially as a sort of transactional exchange. Obviously, to look at the State Department in the U.S. right now, there's not, there's a lot of vacancies in terms of ambassadorships in the region, and I was wondering how that sort of impacts the situation and how much that's an hindrance to the outreach that South Korea is intending to do.
That's a great question.
Well, you see, actually, your ambassadorship in Seoul is vacant almost more than 1 year. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I know that one person is going on the process of screening at the moment. Actually, as a Korean diplomat, I served in the Korean Foreign Ministry more than 30 years, and we have never ever thought that vacancy of the ambassador for such a long time. In Korean case, actually. But I found out Korean new government is also has some kind of vacancies in our ambassadorship in some places, important places. Now we are filling it up. I think it is related with kind of transparency and of the appointing a ambassador, such an important post to a certain country. Maybe Korea is also, learning from you. And we also have a very meticulous kind of process of screening and appointing of ambassadors to a certain country. And it takes quite a time. And in case of United States, it's such a very exceptional case. I don't think it's a really appropriate one. We should be always expedite this kind of process. Korea also, these days to appoint or to nominate a person to an ambassador to a certain country, it takes quite a process of screening, and so it takes time. And it's it's really it's not a happy case, but it's a story, a real story, reality at the moment. Okay.
How about Rafik, and then we'll go here? Rafiq first, yeah.
My question is, what space is available now for South Korea to exercise public diplomacy, given that in the realm of what's happened so far, it's mainly been between the United States, China, and other big powers, partly driven by the United States' interest in having sanctions imposed, which requires the support of China and Russia on the Security Council. Now South Korea could play some role in helping marketization, but sanctions come in the way of that as well. So what's left if you have no space at the geopolitical level and a very limited one at the market level? What's left?
Well, actually this public diplomacy this policy can be compatible with these sanctions or dialogues or these kind of other means of pressuring on North Korea actually. Public diplomacy can go on, I think, it's compatible, can go on either with engagement or either pressuring on North Korea, and it's an ongoing process in the South, this kind of public diplomacy. Actually, many South Korean defectors are engaged in this kind of activities, and some progressive government sometimes try to stop it because of North Korean asking that it should be stopped. And but this, I don't know, this is a public diplomacy or not. But I would like to introduce you one episode which I had when I had a talk with a recent North Korean high-ranking diplomat who defected to Korea recently, last year actually, Mr. Tae Young-ho. And he said that the one case which North Korean regime surrendered to the people's demand, North Korean people's demand, was when the Kim Jong-il era, when the Kim Jong-il regime made a currency reform in North Korea. And actually it became a disaster. And North Korean regime could manage to contain this situation by making a scapegoat and also executing the then vice premier, the deputy prime minister, who was responsible of this currency reform. So he emphasized that now in North Korea, market and money is getting more and more influence, and people knows that previously they totally depended on their lives to the Kim Il-sung regime and Kim Jong-un regime, and totally dependent on the regime, everything, food and clothing and everything. Without the government's help, then they couldn't survive. Now, marketization makes it possible that the people gaining money with their own money, they can survive. So gradually they know that the money is more important. Market and money is more important than the regime. And this dilute the authority of North Korean regime. And they can live without party and without the government. That is a very important element in the dynamics of North Korean society. I don't know if this I rightly replied to your question, but yeah.
I'm going to jump in on that just to speak to the Korean authorities here, because I really think, as you said, there's not a lot of room for geopolitics or sanctions. Things are going the way they're going, but one of the things that public diplomacy is important about is providing alternative viewpoints. And the South Korean government right now may be happy with exactly how everything's going, but if they're not, I think there's two particular things. One is the costs of a war. There was a wonderful New York Times op-ed this weekend by Kang talking about why in South Korea they're not eager for a war. And it wasn't just like, it was very evocative about, it was a wonderful piece, right? But there isn't enough saying, look, we are actually people over here, there's millions of people over here, because otherwise, in America, we don't care. I mean, we just don't care if they're not Americans. This is important for Koreans to be talking about. the shared history, the shared values, what's going on in Korea, it's a sigh, right? No, not funny, not funny. Right, so I think that's very important for them to be talking about.
I was a little bit impressed and quite much impressed by your remark that there is ongoing discussions and controversies in the journalism in the U.S., particularly in terms of the public diplomacy and also in the journalism angle. I think the President Trump's tweet diplomacy, I think seems to me as baloney, probing the public opinion when he wants to lay out, craft some strategy for the international issues. So I am wondering just if there are any voices that President Trump's tweet diplomacy is connected to the public diplomacy, one way of communicating with the domestic public to see what they are really thinking about his positions and his plans for the international foreign public.
It's a great question.
Good question.
One of the things that we are looking into is exactly, Dave, what you said. How is social media? How is that changing our national security decision making in terms of opening up, options or closing up options? And this is really unfolding, right? This is a good case. But to your point, we are not very clear because, if you've been following the news, that we thought there was a good cop, bad cop kind of a situation, but then it seemed it's not that case. But we also think that maybe our president is, talking to his base, not talking to the broader, American public or the global community. So there's a lot of confusion in this case, and I think that it is very important that for us, to have very clear, clarity in policies, not only to the American people, but to the world. Unfortunately, we are not in that moment, and we just raised questions, I guess, but we will be looking into that. It's a fascinating because I think this issue we have seen this manifest in different ways, how social media played a role in some of these key diplomatic moments, negotiations, even during the Iran deal. And this may be just another sort of a manifestation what the role of social media is playing now. And I think it's a subject matter that we are looking into this, that hopefully that we can shed some more light on this soon.
We have time for one more question. Let me make one small comment about that, which is, as of yet, everything that Trump said he would do about China, he hasn't done. 45% tariffs, currency manipulator on day one. That doesn't mean it's all talk, but as of yet, he hasn't followed up with a lot of the threat. I mean, it's a very interesting thing. How about this lady, and you have the last, better be a good question.
Hi, I'm a music major. I'm studying at USC, and I'm starting reading newspaper instead of listening Mozart because I'm really worried about Korean situation. My professor asked me, and my German professor, he actually experienced World War II, and he really worried about my family in Korea. And I think I really agree with what Professor David Kang said. I think the Korean government and social media have to speak out more, not under what Trump was really doing with the media. I think he's doing as a business guy in politics. So, and also I'm a big fan of Professor Shin. And you are, I think you study in North Korea too, right? You forced a PhD from North Korea. So your experience, if you are president right now in Korea, do you think President Moon Jae-in, I'm also a big fan of him too, but do you think he's doing really good right now, or what is your suggestion if you are Korean president from your experience? You live there, you study there, you know these people.
Good question. Yes, I think President Moon Jae-in is doing well. Actually, you should understand that Korea is historically, always under the influence of the United States. As you know, that the Korean president, when he takes office, then the number one thing is that he's visiting Washington and meeting U.S. president, and to how to accommodate his policy thinking with the U.S. President, U.S. administration. That's one of the most important things. And as you know, that President Moon government's basic stance toward North Korea is rather liberal and progressive. But GOP, the Trump government's basic stance is a little different. So how to accommodate this kind of discrepancy is one of the most important things. And there are criticism at the moment in South Korea that President Moon is too much cautious with regard to North Korea and sometimes to the United States. But it's but I personally, as a citizen, I can understand it. You see, he has a basic policy with North Korea. It's a more progressive one, but he should deal with United States. Some criticize him. He's too soft toward Trump, and some criticize him. He's too soft toward North Korea. But how you see, if you side to North Korea too much, side to Trump, then I think both of it will become potential disaster to the South Korea. So it's I can understand them. He's going through this difficult task of accommodating two sides, and so as I told you, South Korean people may, for a while, should withstand this kind of difficulties with patience. And personally, I hope that we could change North Korean regime gradually, and there will be a peaceful resolution of these nuclear issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ambassador Shin. This was great. This is really wonderful. Thank you.